Hey folks, welcome back to the Flipside, and tonight we have an incredible story of resilience, of strength of character, of just an amazing tale. As this is going to be our first video to get the channel rolling, I didn't want it to be one that was all blood and murder and guts and all that kind of stuff. You be the judge of yourselves. I mean, it is a harrowing tale. And there are elements of it that are quite disturbing, but in the grand scheme of things, it's actually a success, and I'll point out the reason why I believe that in the tail end of the video. But before that all happens, and by the by, if you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe. Please hit that like button, and also tap that notifications bell so you'll get updates as and when there's new content available from the Flipside, which we're hoping at the moment to be just a weekly upload, but it could very well be that if it gains traction and people are interested, then I'll increase the frequency of the content to about twice a week, with all the research and the writing and everything that goes into all of this, and I am just a one-man band. It does take a bit of time, but that's by the by. Sit down and enjoy the tale for tonight, which is an incredible tale of strength of character. Born in Long Island on December 30th, 1982, Catherine Beers, or Katie as she was often referred to, was raised in a manner that no child should ever have to endure. Her mother, Marilyn, was indifferent to the child. She showed little to no emotion, there was no connection, and she would regularly leave her infant daughter in the charge of the girl's godmother and her husband, Linda and Sal Inghilleri. Now, Inghilleri, what a piece of work she was. She would often treat Katie as a slave. By age 5, the young girl, rather than playing with dolls and dolls' houses, she would have a long list of daily chores to address around the house, as well as being ordered to go to the stores to buy cigarettes and other items as requested by her godparents. Now, on a more somber note, the sexual abuse and rape at the hands of Sal Inghilleri had started when Katie was just 2 years of age. Katie soldiered on, used and abused at the hands of those who were supposed to offer her solace and protection in her formative years, namely her parents and her guardians. Now, there was one person who seemed to be a beacon of light in little Katie's dark existence, and that was in the form of John Esposito, their neighbour. It's as if he could see that she was enduring some hardship and would always smile and offer her candy. She saw him as a friend, someone to trust. Now, over the years, she would be able to have a few giggles with her neighbour, just fleeting moments of childhood that seemed so alien in the enduring hell that she was living. Little did she know that this guy would come to haunt her in later years. Now, in 1992, as that year rolled around and little Katie was now 9 years old, the world was rocking out to that age-old classic of Achy Breaky Heart by Billy Ray Cyrus. Tiger Woods was 16, had become the youngest ever competitor in a PGA sanctioned event, and both the Summer and Winter Olympics were both being held in the same year and hosted in the town of Albertville in France. But for Katie, it was simply a matter of same shit, different day. But with everything that was happening in her life, as December rolled around, Katie was looking forward to her 10th birthday that would fall on the 30th. I often wonder if she was wondering if things would change as this new chapter in her life started. Now, just 2 days before her birthday, her friend and neighbour John Esposito had asked Katie's godmother Linda if he could take Katie to a local amusement park by the name of Spaceplex. Given that Esposito had often carried out chores around the Inghilleri's household, and mixed with the fact that Linda didn't want to piss him off because she obviously wanted him to carry on doing the odd job here and there, his request was granted. But once at the amusement park, Esposito made an excuse of having better games and candy at his house, and lured Katie there on the premise of having a birthday surprise for her that would surpass all of her birthdays to date, which probably, in all truth, wouldn't be difficult. Katie's sad existence was about to get a whole lot worse. Now, given the absolute hell she'd been living through, maybe she was keyed into sensing predatory danger, and it wasn't long before Katie sensed something was wrong. With all the space available in the house, it seemed weird to her that the only place she'd been instructed to play with her presents and with the video games was on the bed. By her account, Esposito had been acting weird all afternoon. She knew she was in trouble when he slid up behind her, carefully placed a mouth over her hand and told her that he wasn't going to hurt her, only to then start molesting her and sexually abusing her. Now this was the start of what was to be 16 days of unbelievable suffering by the little girl. Unknown to her, Esposito had purposely built a dungeon specifically for Katie beneath the garage of his house. Accessed by a small cupboard that led to a low corridor, the dungeon measured just 6 feet by 7 feet. Inside, a small camping mattress, a commode toilet, a small television that was hooked up to some security cameras were the only furnishings. The tiny space had just the one access point, which was blocked by a 200-pound square of cement. The immovable door had to be winched open each time Esposito wished access. When closed, the cement block would then have soundproofing and linoleum placed over and around it to hide its location and muffle any sounds that may have been coming from within. Now, in a bizarre twist to the story, Katie and other children had often played in the pile of dirt displaced to make way for this dungeon a couple of years prior to Katie's abduction. After that first abuse at the hands of her neighbour, Katie was instructed to get into the hole and crawl to the dungeon. It would be her home for the next 16 days, and during this time, Esposito would visit his young captive to abuse and rape her as he saw fit. He would restrain her to pipes within the space using a medium-sized chain that he looped around the child's neck. This in turn was secured in place with padlocks. Now, one of the heart-wrenching aspects of this despicable event was the fact that Esposito had placed a voice-activated tape recorder inside the dungeon. Nothing could be more heart-wrenching to hearing Katie celebrate her own 10th birthday by singing "Happy Birthday to Me" than the words uttered during one evening as Esposito entered the dungeon to continue the abuse. "Please, don't do that to me again tonight," referring of course to the sexual abuse that she was suffering at the hands of this monster. Now, in the world outside, the police had marked Esposito as a prime suspect in the case. In fact, the command centre for the search had been set up on his very front lawn. Sadly, given the depth of the dungeon below Esposito's garage, the police couldn't hear the screams of the young girl, who was located literally a matter of feet away from where they stood daily. In a ruse to shake them from his trail, Esposito had Katie record a message to a tape recorder that he then played back via a payphone to the answering machine of Katie's grandmother, Linda Inghilleri. "Help, I've been kidnapped by a man with a big knife." Now, in Esposito's mind, this would reinforce the story that he'd given to police of seeing Katie being manhandled away from the Spaceplex amusement arcade on the day of her disappearance by an obviously unknown third party. Now, on one occasion, during her captivity, little Katie could hear the muffled voices of what were in fact police officers searching Esposito's house. They couldn't hear her screams, but Esposito did. At that point, he tried to persuade Katie to agree to take some photos of her appearing to be dead so that he could try again to shake the police from his trail. It took guts for the little girl to refuse. Now, thankfully, I guess we can say thankfully in this case, but Esposito was not someone willing to revert to murder in order to cover his tracks. So on January the 13th, 1993, he walked out to the police on his front lawn and confessed to the abduction of Katie Beers. On showing them the access point and dungeon, it led one federal agent to describe the scene as something from the horror movies The Silence of the Lambs. On the day of her final release, Katie would recount that she thought the voices coming down the corridor were simply other people coming to abuse her. Little did she know that they were there to free her from her hell, and that would be the last day that she would ever be sexually abused. When Katie was free, her suffering was over. In light of her home situation, she was placed up for adoption and was fostered out relatively quickly to a couple living in East Hampton, New York. Her new family strived to then give Katie as best an upbringing and childhood, of what remained of it, as much as they could given her long suffering past. But with amazing resilience, Katie managed to get on with her life. She is now married and works in insurance and has 2 children of her own. And by her own admission, the foster parents saved her life. and given the abhorrent conditions in which she lived, she can be quoted as saying, and I find this actually blows my mind, "Being abducted was unfortunately the best thing that ever happened to me, because it got me out of that abusive situation." Now, over time, Katie has managed to close out those dark days from her memory. In fact, she finds it quite difficult in recounting everything that happened to her, due simply to removing that from her whole thought process. Now, there was a time when she needed to remember those chapters of her life, but as she says, remembering is healing. I'm sure of that now. No matter how hard it is to talk and write about the embarrassing details, they had to be brought to light. And then, once they were revealed, they could be shed. And like an old skin, they could be buried. So what became of Katie's tormentors? John Esposito, who had confessed to the abduction of Katie, was duly sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. This he served at the infamous Sing Sing prison in Westchester County, New York. During his trial, Katie had testified that he had abused and raped her, but for some reason he was not charged with rape during his sentencing. John Esposito was found dead of natural causes in his prison cell on the morning of September the 4th, 2013. This was just days after his fourth parole hearing in 20 years. Sal Inghilleri, the husband of Kate's godmother Linda, who had raped Katie since the age of 2 until her abduction by Esposito, was eventually tried and sentenced to 12 years hard time. He too would see the end of his days in incarceration, as he died in prison in 2009. Given the hatred by prisoners in general towards those who abuse children, one can only hope that these monsters suffered greatly at the hands of other inmates during their respective jail terms. For that would only be just and incredibly fitting. So there you have it, an incredible story of resilience in the face of adversity, of survival against the worst of predators. Now, over the years, Katie has given numerous video interviews about her ordeal. You can find the links to a couple of those in the description below. She has also penned a book about her life experiences entitled Buried Memories, a book that was co-authored by reporter Caroline Gussoff, who had covered Katie's case as it was happening. Now, it's always nice to have a story with a happy ending. Alas, in the realm of child abduction, it seems to be something that is all too scarce of an outcome. And that's all there is from me for today. If you haven't already, please smash that subscribe button, punch the crap out of the like button, and place that notifications bell in an armbar until it taps out and sends you the details of my upcoming stories. Until then, I'll see you on the flip side.